So we come to the last part, and I ask Ilona Kickbusch to join the panel. I ask Tatjana von Steiger to join the panel. I ask Stefan Germann to join us, and Lucy Setian to join us again. Hi everybody, good to have you here. I just shortly introduce the speakers we have new on the floor. Just a moment, here now I can see all of you. Tatjana von Steiger is Deputy Head Domain Global Cooperation at the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Good to have you here, good to have you. We see you sit in front of our federal castle of the Bundeshaus.
Well, that's what we think.
Maybe we have a time difference between us because it's already almost dark there. And Ilona, I don't see you, but I hope you can hear us.
Yes, it says that the organizer has blocked my video, so there's nothing I can do here.
So I'm the organizer, so we can change this, sorry.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Oh, here you are. Hi.
Hi.
Ilona Kickbusch, Professor Ilona Kickbusch, we know her already in real life symposia. She has already joined, and she is here as the co-chair of the Financial Times and Lancet Commission Governing Health Futures 2030, growing up in a digital world. Good to have you here. Tatjana, I would like to start with you first, and I ask all of you to have, if possible, always short answers, because I can imagine that a lot of our participants would like as well to join afterwards the debate, so that we are not going too long into details. But Tatjana von Steiger, I want to start to go in a little bit to start with the question around health system strengthening. We see that we have with digital technologies really huge potential to overcome gaps in existing health systems, but we see as well that we have a lot of projects developing in this field, and that doing have the contrary effect, that they produce fragmentation within health systems and weakening health systems. For the global program health system strengthening remains a very important topic. How does SDC tries to bring digitalization forward, that it can help to strengthen health systems?
Thank you. First of all, do you understand me? Do you hear me?
Perfect, thank you.
Very good, because I have construction in the background, so I decided I'll take the headphone.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for
the construction work, but we hear you as well.
Okay, so. That's good. I'm sorry for the construction. I can't change that. Okay, thank you for the question. I tried to be brief. This is a bit difficult, but just stop me if I talk for too long. Yes, it is a huge potential. Correct, but as you say, there are also challenges, and maybe I start with one challenge we tend to forget, because it's related to the hype. The challenge of the pilotitis. There are so many different projects in this field, because it's an interesting field for innovation, but also for investment, that we lose track of how they actually fit into the system. And they're standalone, they're vertical, and this also bears the risk for scalability. What we are interested is really in driving projects, driving programs in this field, in order for those initiatives, those innovations to really have the potential to scale up, because otherwise we have to ask ourselves in regards to the impact of where we invest this rather scarce resources we have also. Now, there's of course another huge set of challenges around legal and regulatory frameworks, technical and semantic interoperability, knowledge silos, capacity building of providers and users, as well as sustainable economic models. And that's where I found Chan Suchanta's presentation very interesting, because she was raising the issues of ethical and I am adding there the term of human rights risks arising from the application of these technological developments in public health. So when it comes to SCC, what we do not consider technologies for health as isolated products, tools, but as a part of our concerted efforts and comprehensive packages to strengthen health. What we aim at is to contribute, because we can't do it alone, to a defragmentation of the digital health space in fostering the alignment and complementarity and unlocking the potential of digitalization while mitigating its risk. And there we have a number of initiatives from different, which try to tackle this issue from different angles. And I'm just mentioning them. I'm not going to go into detail, because so in the discussion I can do that if participants are interested. For example, we have one initiative is a study to map and access relevant technologies for health. This is carried out with the University of Geneva and the Geneva University Hospitals. Another initiative is an open insurance management information system. It's really there to provide to represent an open source software that seeks to provide a comprehensive system linking patient, provider, and payer data. Then with the Impact Hub Basel and Geneva, we have an initiative that strives to tap the potential of startup companies in LMICs to improve health. And then we are contributing also to the Lancet and Financial Times Commission Governing Health Futures 2030 in supporting the Commission's work with a particular focus on youth. And just to close with this question, what we strongly believe in as SDC is that if the risks and challenges are managed effectively, with a strong collaboration and governance mechanisms in place, new innovations and technologies will accelerate the pace of change and create new opportunities in helping the healthcare systems in lower and middle-income countries to respond to the complex and evolving challenges. But in the end, it's really about governance and good governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's about good governance. Again, we are at this point. Ilona, from your perspective as co-chair of this commission, having heard now Tatjana von Steiger, do you think Switzerland addresses key points that you find as well within the commission on a global level as the key points that have to be addressed, that we can mitigate risk of digital technologies and at the same time make use of the opportunities these technologies provide us?
Well, you know, Martin, we are finding that there are very, very few countries that actually are doing this systematically. And we have to look at it basically at three levels, because on the one level, you look at the very concrete tools in digital health that are available. And the most obvious, of course, are the apps. And here to have, you know, a systematic approach that really addresses the safety, the security, the efficacy, the privacy, etc., of such digital tools is actually still lacking in most countries. And we actually see that countries sort of run behind the innovation and often don't have the institutions, the staff, the expertise to actually respond to what is out there on the market or what's offered by science. Just think of the Swiss discussion around the COVID app, how difficult that was to take decisions to move it forward. But in particularly what most countries find very difficult is on the one hand, the development of these digital tools that in a country, let's say like the United States, are managed through the same way that other technology is managed, through the FDA, for example. But we see that many of these digital tools actually interface the medical knowledge, the medical diagnosis with people's everyday behavior and link it to an extraction model of data, which is based on profit. So in that sense, making sense and making regulatory sense of this complexity is very important. We see it's not sufficient to actually regulate a lot of digital health under the umbrella of medical devices. And that's actually the direction many countries are going into right now. So that's one side. The other side is the larger issue of the platform economies, because many of these offers are made through major platforms, and we can see, for example, in the European Union, and we will see how much Switzerland links up to that, there is the attempt to formulate the Digital Services Act, which actually tries to regulate digital services that come from other countries but are applied within your country. Let's take a mental health app developed in California that people sign up to in Bern. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of the regulation? How safe, how efficacious, whatever is this thing? And who actually benefits, makes profit, pays taxes, perhaps even in relation to these services. So that's another big complex. And the third big complex that we are finding is that while maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, definitely at the beginning when we were thinking about the Commission, it seemed much more that there was sort of one internet out there. That's gone. We are seeing a significant, sort of some people call it a decoupling of the internet. So we are seeing, we're really experiencing the lack of global governance here. And again, I think Stefan will speak about this. What's going to happen with our health data without any such regulation? We're seeing significantly new terms coming up, like digital sovereignty, and the ownership then becomes a very, very critical issue. So I think all countries, and Switzerland as well, are really challenged to have the right kinds of institutions, to link up particularly with other Western democracies to actually ensure privacy and human rights, and to particularly then in the context of development, to be sure that the issue of data extraction, which some people actually call data colonization, that we act against that. If I can make a last comment, something that also relates back to what we had earlier on the ethics, what we are finding is, while there's been a lot of discussion about privacy, data ownership, and all of that, we believe as a Commission we have not had enough discussion on data solidarity. We talk about health solidarity through our social insurance systems, but we don't talk about data solidarity. How do we share data for public purpose? And COVID-19 again has shown us that we haven't yet found an answer for that. And we need a new social consensus around health data that we do not have, and that is going to be a very big message from our Commission.
Thank you. This was already now a big message from your side. Thank you so much. Stefan, the ball was thrown to your part of the field around data sovereignty, data solidarity, and data colonialization, and the big question, and as well already our foreign minister, Federal Councillor Ignacio Cassis mentioned this in the morning, the importance of human rights in this topic, to have this in mind. Let's talk about regulations. Regulations are in the room, and I think regulations, are they needed for getting to the point that we have more data solidarity and less data colonialism?
Yeah, I think I would like to put that into a global geopolitical context and then bring it down. Wired is one of the leading publications in the sort of digital innovation space, and they had 2-3 years ago a really interesting article called "The War of AI." I think in there was a quote from Putin, and that illustrates then sort of what I will share. He said, "Whoever will control AI controls the world." So, taking that from that geopolitical standpoint, it's not surprising that there is actually quite a bit of a resistance to get to some global regulatory frameworks that actually would sort of create some rules of engagement around, data and AI in particular. And that has implications in terms of the domain of health. So there is a tension between innovation and regulation. And how can we ensure that regulation is really creating that enabling environment for innovation really to flourish in terms of human health and well-being? And I think that is the critical question that we collectively need to address, both at the global level, but then as well at national levels. There are some really good examples, and I think, with all the critique that maybe the German government and the Minister of Health, Jens Spahn, got because of the speed that they put together the digital Versorgungsgesetz, or the digital sort of health law, which is less than a year old. I do think there is a lot of lessons to learn from that. They're trying to balance with that approach sufficient space of innovation with a basic premises of ensuring it's do no harm to start with, and then sort of build upon to see, okay, does it really deliver as well on health outcomes? And it gives the sort of innovators the space to actually have responsible AI and digital solutions being deployed, tested, and reimbursed and built. So you create actually a market for digital innovation through that legislative approach. And I think it would be interesting to see how Switzerland, within our Swiss context, is actually sort of moving into a similar sort of approach. And that shows that regulation doesn't need to be against innovation, and innovation can benefit from regulation if well done. And I think, and Ilona might be able to share a little bit more afterwards, we as well need to think, and I mentioned that in a previous session here today, we can't use outdated analog governance and regulatory mechanisms to try to do something in the digital space that's very fast, very elusive, very abstract. So we need to think through, and that's what Ilona and Anurag Agrawal, who co-lead the Financial Times and Lancet Commission, really are starting to think as well. We need to think, what are the digital sort of solutions and AI solutions that help us in more dynamic regulatory, more dynamic legislative environments, such as the ITU WHO algorithm benchmarking working group, and there are many other examples.
Thank you. Lucy, regulation for innovation. I suppose Novartis Foundation maybe finds this interesting. I'm quite keen to hear what you think about it. Maybe Novartis in itself found it not so interesting to see regulation and innovation together. But what are your thoughts from your practical experience? Is there a need for regulation, especially in the field of artificial intelligence, where you are quite strong?
So first, let's maybe step back. I cannot comment necessarily on the overall position of Novartis or the Novartis Foundation per se, but what we can comment on why regulation exists in the first place. Regulation is there to support against bad market practices, against misuse, against what basically we don't want to happen to us as the end users of a particular solution or a system. Now, for example, as we know, in the European Union, regulations are quite strong on both sides as to protect us, but also to enable for innovations to thrive through the public funding mechanisms, through space for governed data innovation, let's say, or innovation through open innovation systems and databases. But the question is, can you do that everywhere? Can you allow for open innovation and regulated open innovation across different geographies? Can low and middle income countries take some of the best practices of more established structures for innovating using data, or it's not that easy? Or the other way around, can maybe low and middle income countries propose certain mechanisms and frameworks which potentially we can use here in order to allow for innovation to continue? Because it's not that easy. If you think of a structure in which you're basically trying to rule every single possible scenario, that's not going to be possible. It's not possible that you build a new, let's say, completely new idea, a business model that nobody has ever seen, and that to foresee in advance what kind of regulation you need to in order to make sure that it works. So we have to take it with a pinch of salt, so to speak, that there are different scenarios, but we should think as to what are the ways for us to collaborate in different formats of public-private partnerships, for example, for these kind of innovations to be actually successful in the long term, even if we're talking about the regulations which are coming in the future and which might be not very clear today. Like we see in our work, we have seen, for example, during COVID-19 in Brazil, we worked closely with the state of Sao Paulo, and we were helping them essentially to work with the local hospitals, with the data science community, with funders to support their public funding program for innovations for COVID-19. So essentially, they set up a regulation that works for a very specific challenge, and they created the right mechanism to maintain it, to manage it, and to ensure that all concerns which might be raised are actually addressed on time. So the question is the use case. As long as the use case of the innovation is clear enough, the right regulation can serve its purpose. But if you over-regulate, then you create the other side, that you don't allow for any innovation to take place. So the balance is very important, and it always starts with the use case. You have to really start with what are you trying to solve.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. Before I'm opening up the floor to the debate, I would like to go back to Tatjana von Steiger. Take this up a little bit, because I think what Lucy said is, from me as well, from one perspective, quite important to look. We talked about data colonialization, but we have a behavior, especially I think in our way, how we are doing international cooperation. We often come with our digital solutions from the north, and we neglect local capacities. And sometimes this is hindering innovation as well, because we don't work really together with local capacities where we work. Two questions to Tatjana von Steiger, but please for a short answer, makes it difficult. So first of all, what do you think about this? What could the SDC do for fostering local capacities, especially in digital technologies, that we don't come with all the time with the technologies from Silicon Valley or from Zug Valley or wherever? And second, there was a strong commitment around the case we are discussing about regulation this morning as well from our foreign minister, that Switzerland could take over responsibility on the global level and on a meaningful digitalization. Do you think, or how could Switzerland bring this forward into the political dialogue on a global level?
Thank you. Okay, two big questions. I start with the second one. How could we bring that into the political dialogue? I think, yes, we are very well positioned to do so. First, because we are small and agile, we are And that's in the global and multilateral system can be hindering to some extent, but it can sometimes be also to our advantage that we do not belong to any bigger alliance or supranational organization, which gives us the possibility to actually be the bridge builder. And when I listen to Lucy and the other speakers, how do we strike the balance between regulation and innovation? And the pandemic showed us that we can only do that if we align at the international level our forces and do not just each and every country on its own start to come up with a framework and build a framework. This is not going to help. But we also, and this is maybe already an answer to the second question you were asking, to the first question you were asking me. What do we do? We have to make sure that we give those that, and that's a question of equity. We give those that do not have the same means, that do not have the same access, that do not have the same power. We have to give them a platform, we have to give them a voice. And that's where Switzerland comes in, and that's where Switzerland is very strong, as we are perceived as someone who does not have a hidden agenda at the political level. At the same time, we are known as a country which is promoting innovation, and we are perceived as a country when it comes to partnerships that somehow really tries to get into an honest dialogue. One further comment on your first question. Digital literacy. This is something we have to invest in. I mean, if we do not invest into that, we can't overcome the challenge of equity. And if we don't bring equity into whatever system we come up with, then the system is going to fail. And all the digital tools, they are going to benefit just one side, but not all sides.
Interesting point, important point. I think Stefan and Ilona and Lucy will have time afterwards to react shortly on these points. But I asked the audience we have around out there to raise your hands if you want to say something, that I can open the mic for you. Ilona, having heard this from Tatjana, do you think Switzerland is prepared and to play this role Tatjana has now developed?
Well, Switzerland has often played such a role, both, as a host, of course, of many of the important organizations in Geneva, and Stefan has already alluded to the cooperation of the ITU and the WHO. I think also what we will be seeing much more is that the World Trade Organization, that is also in Geneva, is going to play a significant role, because we will be getting new intellectual property, data extraction, taxation issues, etc., across boundaries related to data. And, the adage that data is the new oil is not quite true, but definitely it's an area where a lot of money is made and where a lot of rent seeking is possible. And therefore it's becoming increasingly important competitively for countries. And of course, the geopolitical conflict that Stefan referred to between the United States and China, and in brackets, the comment from Russia, is related not just to different political systems, but is related to a commercial competition, because, the big industries of the present, and even more so in the future, are either in the digital sphere or they are dependent on a sort of digital infrastructure. And, we've seen that in relation to supply chains in COVID-19 and many of these things. So yes, I think Switzerland could play a role. It's tried to start doing that, and but I think it will be different now than it was 5 years ago, because those blocks are becoming much more prominent, much less willing to talk to each other, and therefore maybe an entry point through health we thought, could be easier. Now we don't quite know the results of the American election, so we don't know if one of the big blocs is still going to be with us in global health. But a lot needs to be done, and might I say, it needs to be done with great speed, because we have no time to waste, particularly because of the impact on the low and middle income countries that themselves do not have the regulatory mechanisms, the political strength, and the infrastructure to respond.
Lucy will soon leave us. She has to just told me, so we say already goodbye to Lucy. Thank you for having you with us. And Stefan, where do you see the potential of Switzerland, Switzerland's role?
I think Switzerland has, because of just what Ilona mentioned before, in terms of just the sort of international organizations that are directly linked to many of these issues. But as well, there is sort of still some level of trust around many partners in the global context, in terms of some sort of a broker that tries to accommodate the interests of many within the global public good creation. And so I think with the foreign health policy that Switzerland has, the Gesundheitsaußenpolitik, where actually Federal Councillor Cassis was very instrumental in pushing, and in there is a sort of space for the digital health issues. We do think that Switzerland could actually contribute towards that. The other part, and I mentioned that in my earlier input, is because of Switzerland's own sort of slight fragmented, cantonal health approaches with almost, multiple of independent ministries of health. Lessons learned in terms of the internal collaboration and all the struggles that we actually have to even get electronic medical record up and running in Switzerland is sort of, relevant to probably other actors if we start to look at some of the global level. And I think the Swiss sort of civil society and many of the Medicus Mundi members, they have a strong and long tradition on human rights-based programming. And I think that is really the most critical aspect in all our work, so that we don't end up into this dystopian digital welfare state where state sort of surveillance is sort of used to increasingly control its citizenship instead of the other way around. And that's where sort of, maybe the toolkit that Switzerland could contribute. And I would be happy to very practical work with Medicus Mundi and your member, work with SDC and work with Fondation Botnar to look at, is there some sort of a toolkit for human rights impact assessments around digital health solutions, a very practical tool that organizations, businesses, and governments could use, that when they have an idea, when they sort of ideate and then deploy digital solutions, that they have accompanied a human rights sort of impact assessment done before it's being rolled out at a national level, and then only years later you start to realize what mess we've created, like we have. At the moment there's a total mess with all the social media platforms. And I mentioned earlier on, I really encourage all of you to watch that Netflix movie/documentary called The Social Dilemma. It shows how the flawed business model is trying to use the most scientific, advanced behavioral economics to keep us addicted. Every second we stay longer addicted on Instagram, on Facebook, on any of these platforms, that makes money for these companies. So they create addictions in our behavior as part of their business model. And that's not accepted in any other field of addiction.
Yes, but if I could add here, Martin, really to combine the individual rights with the public interest and the public purpose. Because, you know, a lot of the discussion has been incredibly important, but has focused on individual privacy and individual data ownership.
Mm.
We are starting to develop also through the technology and through all the approaches. We are seeing new mechanisms and new possibilities to actually govern the data commons. And I think, you know, that public interest in terms of, you now think of the vaccination discussion, of the COVID-19 discussions, of the anti-science discussions, you know, all those things that are destabilizing the public health of a country are becoming highly political. And I actually think the whole issue of data governance and digital health is becoming political in a way we perhaps didn't really, or at least not all of us, saw 3 or 5 years ago. And this destabilization is a very, very important issue, and we haven't looked at it enough in terms of how a health debate can also, in a way, destabilize democracies. And that interface is a really, really important one. And we have actually said in the Commission, we need to combine 3 literacies. We need to combine health literacy, digital literacy, and what is called civic literacy, which relates to, you know, how we respect democratic values, how we actually communicate with each other, and what culture of debate we have if we have differences of opinion, for example, in relation to scientific outcomes or things like that. So we're seeing much more interlinkage of the technological, the political, and the social impact, and the rights of individuals and the public interest.
This is a very interesting point, Tatjana. When you think here now, digital literacy, health literacy, civic literacy, what do you think Swiss civil society could play here to bring these literacy forward, especially a network which is engaged in international health cooperation, global health, like Medicus Mundi Switzerland? What do you expect from us?
What do I expect from you? The civil society. Yeah. Civil society in these times has an extremely important role to play. To use these buzzwords besides the advocacy, but it's a watchdog. It has to make sure that's where I think when we, for example, when I mentioned the OMIS, there what we want to make sure is that what we support the data in our partnerships we foster, that the data is a public good and being used. So, and civil society has to demand that. You have to make sure that the public actor is also in the further development. I think what we see these days is we are all challenged by the pace of the changes and transformation, all the different stakeholders of society. And then I think it's always good to go back and to think, okay, what is la raison d'être of an actor like the civil society, like a public actor? What is the role and responsibility that comes with assuming this specific function? What I think, what I expect from civil society is, while being critical, also engaging in a dialogue with partners, maybe not so much in the health sector, and that's where I see an opportunity. There we have progressed much more in terms of overcoming these divides between different sectors, the private sector and public sector. But we really need to engage in a critical debate and bringing all the different actors around the table, and not just blackmailing each other and not talking to each other. So civil society has to open up. Let's use health as a topic. Why? When you compare it with climate change, I think what we've seen as an opportunity, there's definitely also a risk to it and a threat, but suddenly certain things were possible, where we struggle much more in other fields, because it's a threat. It's an immediate threat. The pandemic that led to some behavioral changes that we need to see in other fields as well. So civil society, you can help us make sure that we address issues of equity, that we do not forget the human rights. That's very important part of it, in order to leave no one behind.
Thank you, Tatjana. Stefan, very shortly, what do you expect from civil society?
It's linking on what Tatjana said. I do think it is that sort of strong voice around human rights and accountability of multiple actors, but as well keeping ourselves accountable as civil society, because it's sometimes, there are some civil society actors who are not keeping themselves accountable and take on the role that they kind of speak on behalf of others without actually having any mandate or legitimacy to do so. So it's an important aspect to consider. The other one, particularly linked to, I think, Medicus Mundi, Switzerland, I do think it's a great opportunity that you are one of the founding members of the Transform Health Coalition that really has taken on the mandate to then campaign and advocate up to 2030 many of the recommendations that comes out of the Lancet Financial Times Commission. Because the commission work is not finished by the time the report is done. It's actually starting then to really transform in these sort of three domains, as I shared earlier this morning. And I would encourage all the Medicus Mundi Switzerland members in their field programs with their partners to become, over the next couple of years, an active participant in this advocacy and campaign effort, starting with those key countries where the coalition has identified as starting on these country efforts.
Thank you. Ilona, your last word about civil society, and as always, Ilona, we expect you a very open and honest answer.
Well, I think first of all, it does still need a much stronger voice of civil society in this whole complex of the digital transformation. I don't think, particularly in global health, it has been strong enough. It's often been a kind of afterthought. And it has started now. Also, the Health Hub in Geneva has started discussions around this. I think, the WHO digital strategy has to be looked at, and challenges towards member states and the organization have to be formulated in relation to this balance that we've also been talking about. And, also the tensions that as WHO and all of us have to deal with what has been called the infodemic, there at first instance was no other choice but actually to work on this infodemic with exactly those big tech companies that were actually part of creating the problem. And if you have to keep going to the people who, started the problem for the solution, then you're in deep trouble in the long run, I think. So I hope that more and more civil society groups also emerge in this field and work together with more established groups. In Germany, there's this really interesting group called Algorithm Watch that, has a lot of important functions here. And I think in particular, the the cooperation with the Swiss Development Agency is incredibly important because, you know, we started out with this discussion around fragmentation also, but we are seeing how, you know, low and middle income countries are pulled between the two big geopolitical actors in terms of their investment in digital health, because health is the Trojan horse. And I would wish that civil society actors were much more conscious of the fact that health is the entry point, because health is good. Health, you know, this is doing something good for people, for governments, but actually in many cases it's an extraction process. And therefore, you know, to really watch that closely and to take up that discussion on data colonization, I think is very important for civil society. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilona. Thank you, Tatjana. Thank you, Stefan, for your contribution. Thank you to everyone. We have to close now. We will send just some final remarks from my side. We will send around quite soon an email with links to the resources for this today's symposium, as well with a survey that we can learn. It was our first Zoom symposium, hopefully the last one. Then we just want to make you aware that tomorrow, if everything is working like it should, we will go public with a new website. And then the next symposium will be at the 3rd November 21. We hope to soon communicate as well the topic of it. In the board, we will still discuss this in a short time. And what else? Thank you. Thank you to all the presenters, to all the speakers and participants. A warm thank you to the whole team of Medicus Mundi Switzerland, especially my co-host today, Karin Weiss. She really made a wonderful job and had a really nice moderation of many sessions today. Thank you to Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation for the support, and as well thank you to Fondation Botnar for the support of our digital health program this year. So I leave you go. We were very good, not so much, I think, you followed, I hope, my advice not to follow the election in the US because of your mental health. I think it hasn't finished yet. We will see in some days, hopefully, finally, what is going to happen there. Enjoy the day, keep safe and healthy, and keep in solidarity with everyone in this world. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.